Tonight, as more questions arise about the security clearances for Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, a former member of President Clinton's National Security Council joins us to weigh in. Former Pennsylvania Congressman Joe Sestak joins RFL on that and much more. Plus, it is a big week for the Russia probe. We'll show you what's on tap and explain why this could be pivotal for both Robert Mueller and Donald Trump. Then an inside look at President Trump's 2020 campaign. I'll speak with a Washington Post reporter who's got the inside scoop on the president's strategy to try and keep his job. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman in tonight for Richard French, and we begin with the ongoing controversy over the security clearances of first daughter Ivanka Trump and her husband Jared Kushner. Of course, each of them is an advisor to the president. Now, four ranking Democrats on key Senate committees are demanding an investigation into what happened. Senators Warren, Feinstein, Menendez, and Reid asking the Director of National Intelligence and the Inspector General to look into how they got those clearances, even when the security and intelligence community said they shouldn't. Those four senators say they are particularly concerned about how the president has handled the whole thing. They say his decision to just grant the clearances despite those concerns from the intelligence community, as well as Trump's former chief of staff and White House counsel, were, in their words, very concerning. And joining us now, Joe Sestak. He's a former Democratic congressman from Pennsylvania. He's also a retired rear admiral in the U.S. Navy. Congressman, I want to start with security clearances and the reports that the president intervened to get Jared Kushner his top secret security clearance. It's now all under investigation by House oversight. The Times reporting that even Chief of Staff John Kelly wrote a contemporaneous memo that he was ordered to do so. First of all, the president has the legal authority to give a security clearance to anybody. If so, what's the big deal, and how big of a concern is it that he's going against the advice of his intel community to grant that access?
Well, Andrew, I think there's two issues here. One you mentioned. Does the president have the right, the authority to do this? Yes, he does. But is it the proper use or a misuse of that authority? As an example, the president has the authority to use nuclear weapons. But if tomorrow he were actually to launch something against Tahiti, isn't that a misuse of that authority? And Congress has the responsibility to make sure that the president is using his power for good and proper use. And so after you have had every agency that is responsible for this, OMB, Department of Defense, or FBI themselves, the own White House has a security office that goes over this, and they say that because of the exposure that these individuals have had to foreign powers, for example, one of them actually using in Russian embassy communications equipment to talk to Russians, is there not a question of the loyalty, but is there a question of risk? And for the integrity of the process, that is why Congress has a responsibility to ensure that the president was accountable in what he decided to do, because nobody knows of any other time that this has ever been done where the president's intervened on what the process has told him is the proper way to do this.
Let me ask the devil's advocate question there. If there's a risk of being compromised or could be subject to blackmail, the kind of stuff that we heard about Michael Flynn, why is that the standard as opposed to was compromised or was blackmailed?
I think this is what you have to find out. A whiff is not enough, but it is enough to say, in order to condemn, but it is enough to say, let us call the papers over here like we have the right to do in Congress, and to look at them and say, is this what the agencies found out? Because look, up until now, when you reveal everything about you, that it is pretty private, some of that stuff out there. And they put you through some tough questionings. I remember back in the mid-1980s, I backpacked through all of communist Eastern Europe because I wanted to see it, even though I was a naval officer and I took military leave, but to also visit the village where my father had emigrated from. Boy, the questioning they put me through when I came back, who'd you meet, what'd you do for? And so maybe they thought, why'd this guy go there? But until they had reviewed it, or if someone intervened like the president has done, and then there's questions about a whiff, that's why you have to go through this process of due diligence.
If you were on the House Oversight Committee, which is now looking into these matters, what would you want to know about whom and why?
What I would like to know is, what was it that, first of all, that the professionals found that they said, this is why they should not be given a clearance, not because of the loyalty probably, but because of the risk that they could be subject to blackmail or some unsavory information coming out that is irresponsible to America's security interest. So I would ask to find out exactly what they had seen, and then I would ask the individuals come forward and walk through this. Look, this is why we have a constitution of balance of power, to make sure Congress never should go over beyond its powers, as well as the president. And this is the proper checks and balances that we have. But that's the kind of information I would request, purely because the most important issue today in America is the lack of trust. It's bigger than the debt we have today, that trust deficit. And you can only heal that by having people be accountable and answering for themselves of what they did or did not do. And that's what this is really all about.
I want to shift over to the president's emergency declaration on the southern border. And I'm curious, in your opinion, as both a career military person and also as a former member of Congress, is there any crisis that you're seeing on the border that justifies declaring an emergency?
I do not. Back in 2006, 850,000 illegal crossings of the border happened. In the last couple of years, it's been like 65,000. Instead of something that's emergent and immediate, it's been a long-term improvement over time. In fact, we're at the lowest level of undocumented individuals in America in years. And yet most of those undocumented, the majority of them today when they occur, are because of people who came here legally, but the visas then expired. And so if you talk about crime, even the Cato Institute said that there's 44% less chance that someone who has crossed the border will be apprehended, incarcerated for a crime than there is for a native-born American. Human rights, or human trafficking. If you go to the nonprofits who deal with this issue, they will tell you 2/3 of those in America in human trafficking are American citizens. And the other third usually come here on legal visas, as you just saw in the incident with those down there in Florida. And so the last one I want to bring up, of course, as a military man, is terrorism. It is almost inevitable that most of them have tried to come via our airports. But even if you look at those who are on the terrorist list who tried to cross, about 6 to 7 times approximately they come across the northern border and apprehended than the southern border, and that's in single digits. So no, I saw no reason why we needed to lose billions of dollars, actually so far $11 billion in our GDP, because of this wrong closure and this wrong call of what's really a national security emergency.
There have been plenty of national emergencies that have been declared over the years, including several with military components while you were in the military, which includes a military emergency after 9/11 that allowed the president to move money around, not terribly dissimilar from the current emergency on the border, at least proclaimed by this president. So how is this different from what we've done in the past?
From my own personal experience, to kind of bring it into the emergency, the emergent immediate type of national security crisis, I just returned from sea and I was assigned to the Navy staff when I walked out of the Pentagon, and shortly thereafter that plane dove into that building and I hurried back. And I looked down at that burning scar that plane had made, both in that Pentagon and on our nation. That was a national security emergency, as we found out with the Twin Towers also. And up in Pennsylvania, with that plane that was brought down, that we had a true new emergent threat. That, in my mind, with thousands were killed, 125 at the Pentagon, was a national security emergency. And so we scrambled planes that day and did other things, rightly so. And I thought we responded well.
The president's declaration would take money from military construction, specifically for military housing. Most civilians probably have no idea where or how the military lives. What can you tell us about the living conditions of members of the military?
It has improved tremendously, I can tell you, ever since I joined up as the Vietnam War was ongoing. And we have taken a lot of pride, in fact, some of the best child care centers that you can have in this nation. And so when you live often on a base, all of a sudden you've moved every 2 years or 3 years, and you go down to Mayport, Florida, and there's your ship, and you're leaving there for 6 months to go overseas, and when you're home for another 12, you're doing workups to get ready for the next deployment for about 40% of that time. You're away from your family. And so often, because of distance, et cetera, and high costs, we have given them affordable housing right there on base. And they are good. It's improved so much. And if I could at this moment, there are so many challenges in the military that families have. And so take autism. The autism rate in the military is twice as high as it is in civilian life. How could it not be? When they move every 2 or 3 years and they can't get the right IEP of 504 of the plan to be done before they're moving again. And so that's why we do those things. So to take that money away, inexcusable.
Former Pennsylvania Congressman, Democrat Joe Sestak, and retired Navy Admiral. Always a pleasure and an honor, sir. Thanks very much.
Andrew, thank you. Good to talk with you again.
And up next here on RFL, is the Russia probe winding down, or is Robert Mueller just ramping it up? It's a question we could have an answer to before the end of this week. Former federal prosecutor Roland Riopel joins us to walk us through it.